The hopes were sky high when the Philadelphia 76ers made a massive splash this past offseason, signing Paul George to a full-scale max contract for the next 4 seasons. Well, things have come crashing down this year with the trio of Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, and Joel Embiid playing less than 15 games together, and the future of Paul George is now looking more uncertain than ever. It has been a while since we've seen Paul George on a basketball court because of injury, and it does seem like that is set to extend. And beyond that, we have some even further concerning reports about the future of Paul George and what might go down this offseason. I want to break down what it all means for the Sixers team, what Paul George can still bring to the table, and the likelihood of him being moved, as the latest reports are indicating they will consider. I'm going to dive into all of that, but first let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsor for this video and get right back to the action. We are kicking off a March Madness pool for the channel by partnering with the Hot Takes app and other digest channels for this event. It is completely free to sign up. Just download the Hot Takes app, click the March Madness banner at the top, and under groups select the Digest Media pool. This is really exciting as there's over $25,000 in prizes to be won, and since there's a much smaller pool of people participating, there's a real chance in winning big compared to other bracket challenges out there. Check out the link below or scan the QR code to download the app, and make sure to use promo code DIGEST in all caps to get exclusive perks when signing on. Again, this is completely free, and if you have any issues whatsoever, just use the email down below. We are excited to see you in this March Madness pool. Now let's get into the topic of the video today. And who knows, you may see the very next Sixers star in the March Madness pool because that is the state of the season. But to dive into the latest news, first I want to start off with this report from Shams Charania that says Philadelphia 76ers forward Paul George is consulting with doctors this week on treatment options for his groin and knee injuries, including a possible procedure, sources tell ESPN. A decision is expected early next week. Now, granted, this to me is not much of a surprise. The biggest thing to take of note here is the inclusion of knee on that injury diagnosis. We know that Paul George has sort of dealt with a laundry list of injuries. Let's not forget the bone bruises that he sustained to start the season. The first one starting in preseason, did return during the regular season and re-injured that same bone bruise in that very same knee. He's also had an issue on that pinky that he's continued to deal with. The groin injury has been what's bothering the most of late. The whole conclusion of all of this, there's no reason for Paul George to step back on the floor. We know the state of the season in regards to the Sixers' outlook and maximizing their draft options, really the percentage of them keeping that draft pick, as it has to stay within that top 6 window. Before we wrap up, highlight what those odds are looking like today. But to stick on Paul George a little bit, there was one notable line that did stick out to me, and I do think it's important to know that ESPN has already deleted this passage from the initial report, but shout out to Sixers Adam, who was on it right away, who said, quote, "Multiple sources tell ESPN the NBA has looked into the 76ers' recent absences, particularly over the past week with George and Tyrese Maxey sitting out games." Now, while I understand the integrity of the game angle and wanting to prevent tanking, the bottom line is the NBA is fighting a losing battle against tanking because of the rewards that come and because of how much one impact player can mean by getting that top pick in the draft. And shout out to Cooper Flag, hopefully all good with that ankle. He did leave Duke's game today. Looked like a sprained ankle. X-rays were negative, so hopefully no major concerns there. I think regardless, that guy can be penciled into the number 1 pick. But when there is a player like that on the table, teams are going to go to extreme lengths to get him. Now, I don't think the Sixers are an example of this, to be perfectly honest. We have seen the years where the Sixers team has tanked, and while it's fair to assess that they're not maximizing their chances of winning on an every night basis at this point, it seems like the Raptors and Jazz that I think are more, I would guess, blemishes on the league when in regards to they're keeping fully healthy mid-20-year-old players still just out of games for no real reason outside of rest. Emmanuel quickly, a prime example of that against the Sixers, which was a huge loss by the Sixers team who found a way. And for what it's worth, there was a fine directed at the Utah Jazz for $100,000 in the official statement from the NBA reads, the NBA announced today that the Utah Jazz organization has been fined $100,000 for violating the league's player participation policy. The violation occurred when the Jazz failed to make Lauri Markkanen, a star player under the policy, available for the team's game against the Washington Wizards on March 5th at Capital One Arena, as well as other recent games. The policy, which was adopted prior to the 23-24 season, is intended to promote participation in the NBA's regular season. Does it straight up suck that this is just going to be the situation? Sure, that is fair to assess. I don't think $100,000 is going to make any of these teams turn their nose up at anything when you factor what these guys are making. Paul George, for example, on the books for $52 million this year. But the point being here, there are teams that are being more egregious than the Sixers, so it does feel like it is a little bit more of a magnifying glass on them than other organizations. Now, the other Paul George news that did drop, sort of in the same category here, is we got this from Sam Amico here, saying the Philadelphia 76ers will try to trade Paul George this summer. Now, granted, when speaking about Paul George directly, it has been a disaster season. These numbers, 16.2 points per game, 5.3 rebounds, 4.3 assists, 1.8 steals, shot 43% from the field, 35.8% from three. While those are not horrible numbers outright, when you think of the standard for who Paul George is as a basketball player or who he has been for the better part of his career, this is a disappointment here. Now, is he the reason that this Sixers season has gone off the rails? No, he's not. Could he have been a better solution to that? Should he have been capable of keeping this team afloat in a way that he honestly has not proven to? Sure, that is a fair argument. I'm not here to state that this was a fair value contract or this guy has performed up to the standard, but I do think it is a little bit unfair to Paul if we're going to blame everything on this season on him. In reality, if we're going to slice up the blame pie for this season, the biggest slice still has to get handed to Joel Embiid for his lack of availability and the injury issues that he deals with, and frankly, that has to be the number one driving force of decisions being made moving forward. Is there ever a chance of Joel Embiid returning to a guy who can even play 50 games of a season? I'm not certain that's the case, and frankly, it does not make much sense to continue investing in a guy like Paul George, who's on the later stage of his career, when you might not have the centerpiece that he was brought in to complement. Now, with all that being said, the ultimate conclusion of this season, it all depends on how those ping pong balls fall. There will be a much different outlook for what is the best move in regards to trading Paul George. And by the way, I don't think that is going to be a hot market for Paul George, because I say this same thing in regards to Joel Embiid here. All the other teams in the NBA saw the exact same issues that we did here. They saw Paul George not being available, 41 games that he did play this season, and it seems like that is the final one, certainly this year, maybe in a Sixers uniform. That's a lot of money still committed to this guy, a contract that all other teams in the league were afraid to hand to him, including the Clippers, who he had been at for the past several seasons. That when push comes to shove in this specific situation in years past, that team never blinks, and the Clippers did this past offseason. Now, does that tell us a little bit more about the CBA and the state of the league, or does that tell us a little bit more that they knew about Paul George? I do lean the latter at this point in the time, because we can see what the performance level is on the floor. But the bottom line is none of that matters to the point. Those were decisions that were already made. And speaking of decisions that are already made, Daryl Morey, I think he just needs to stay out of these conferences, man. I know I kind of let loose ranting a little bit about his angry Sixers fan kind of chirp and really his view of basketball that I was more critical of. Well, he had another quote that popped out on that same interview. Shout out to Pablo Torre Finds Out, who says 76ers president Daryl Morey says he asks AI for input when making team decisions. Quote, "We absolutely use models as a vote in any decisions. I would be way cooler with this if that meant Allen Iverson. Unfortunately, it means artificial intelligence there is what Daryl is talking about. And I think that plays directly into the lack of human feel that he has for constructing a roster. When you look at this Sixers team, what went wrong? It's not a talent thing. It certainly is not. I have watched far less talented Sixers teams perform far better than this one this season. But it is certainly fair to evaluate that there is not the right mix of personalities. There isn't this team cohesion, this chemistry, what you hope for in organizations, and that is what's missing. I don't think they have that in your algorithm, Daryl. I don't think that is something that Grok or whoever ChatGPT can tell you to construct a roster there. But I did think that was interesting. And ultimately, the story really comes down to how those ping pong balls fall once again. So I did want to highlight those lottery odds after a massive loss by the Sixers at the hands of the Raptors last night. Shout out to them for not showing up, which did drop them to the 5th best odds for the time being. I will note the Brooklyn Nets do play tonight. They do play the Chicago Bulls, who are just 2 slots lower, and there is no Josh Giddey and no Lonzo Ball today. So we will be Nets fan on this channel for the night and really for the remainder of the season. That we hope for those chances to continue to drop. They're now at 64% chance of keeping the pick. Tonight will impact things a little bit, as if the Nets lose, they will take that full 5th spot, drop the Sixers directly to 6th rather than initially tied for the Raptors for that slot. But as things currently stand, they have a 39.9% chance at a top 4 pick, a 9.8% chance at that number 1 overall pick, and about a 64% chance of keeping it outright for it to fall within those top 6. So that is the clear focus for the remainder of the season. There are still takeaways to be had in this game. What is Quentin Grimes' future role? Is this a guy that you should be willing to match basically no holds bars regardless of the offer? That's sort of the point of a restricted free agent that you do bring in. Or is there a number that you would tap out at? And by the way, with all these cap conversations, which we will get deeper in once we get to the offseason, once the chips fully settle for this season, Where that draft pick falls, and the I guess more notable here, the salary slot that is attached to it, because that alters depending on what the actual order is there. That's going to play a pretty significant role on what their cap outlook is. For example, I believe the number is 14 million for the number 1 pick that is committed to them from a cap perspective there, and it kind of filters down from there. In general, rookies are an incredibly team valuable contract, but that does kind of change at the top of the draft there. So will be interesting if that is the case. That's going to be a problem for another day when we get into, but I do think that is tied to the conversations on what is the actual likelihood of looking to trade Paul George. I do think it is the last time we see Paul George in a Sixers uniform this season. I'm not sold at this current point that it is the last time we see him in a Sixers uniform ever, but that is a conversation to be had once we get a little more information, once we get to the offseason, and once this just season from hell is finally put to an end. But regardless, we're going to keep chugging through right here on Sixers Digest, so appreciate you guys for tapping in with us. As always, we want to make sure you guys are hitting that subscribe button. Only about 30% of you guys watching these videos have subscribed to the channel just yet. Let's keep this Sixers Digest family growing. For those of you listening now, me and my guy Jacob Moreno will be live again at 7, tuning in a little bit more on the tank outlook, some Daryl Morey comments, and everything else in mind. So make sure to tap in with that if you have not already. That will be live on the channel and, of course, available for playback as well. So tap into that full stream. Should be about 45 minutes. Make sure to check that out. I'll be back talking to you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.